We hear of a coming revolution in agriculture that could heal the planet and save the farm. This new system builds beneficial soil biology and structure rather than break it down. It takes carbon out of the air and locks it into the soil where it can provide fertility, prevent erosion, and hold water. A handful of pioneering farmers had developed this soil building system to make their farms more profitable. But could it be a major tool in moderating global warming? How does it save farmers money? Could the resulting increased health of our soil make us more healthy? Could this make farmers the heroes of the 21st century? Hello, I'm Paul Katona. With all the bad news we hear about climate change and farmland collapse, this new system seems to promise solutions. Please join me as I look at these questions and the people involved in a farming revolution in southwest Missouri. I began by contacting Area Soil Health Specialist Drexel Atkisson of the National Resource Conservation Service here in Springfield, Missouri. He listened to my concerns about building soil organic carbon content on the farm, but thought soil erosion and soil health was a more immediate problem. He invited me to come with him to a rain, soil, and watershed demonstration.
We've had these soil health trailers now for about a year and a half. And there's 4 in the state. We have 1 in each of the area offices.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a native of southwest Missouri. Farm was pretty near and dear to me. It still is. I think that the soil is the foundation for everything we are. I got a degree in agronomy from now MSU. I got an internship with NRCS. I went to work for them and graduated college, went on full time, and I made a 22-year stint as a district conservationist. 2009, I was introduced to soil health. Ray Archuleta came to the state of Missouri here and did a series of courses, and I really I fell in love with soil health. I fell in love with that whole process, and it restored my energy about soils. And so I just it really became passionate for me, the soil health aspect. And in 2017, the soil health specialist opportunity opened, and I jumped in with both feet, and here I am.
We hear stories about farmers going broke and leaving the farm. Farms not being very profitable or good for the farmer. What do you see here?
I see that very situation. I just heard a story yesterday about, I say a story, I mean it's real, about operators having a hard time getting enough money to operate this year, and having to give up some farms that they've been operating because they just don't have enough money to operate those farms. I think our agricultural environment is suffering. We're in a point right here, right now, of low commodity prices and very, very expensive inputs. And I think that's where we're trying to get the message out that what inputs can we reduce? What inputs can we eliminate? And it's not easy because we have a system. We have a system created with inputs. So we have to create a system. We have to change that system to adopt a lesser input. We've made a lot of good changes to farms. We are not plowing like we used to. just a little observation. Throughout my career, we've taken a lot of soil and water classes, just like we're going to see today, to show them equipment that was commonly used. 20 years ago, there were a lot of moldboard plows on the equipment lot, a lot of chisels, a lot of cultivators. So I was there yesterday with a student, young employee and student, and I had to hunt around. I had to look pretty hard to find an old moldboard plow. There were a lot of no-till planters and a lot of no-till drills. We're going to see a field of no-till corn today.
Great.
No-till into a cover crop. You don't find very many universities now that offer a degree in agronomy. Most of it's agriculture, something, you know, there's something.
Why don't you educate me, what's the difference?
Well, so that's where I was getting ready to say. So agronomy focused, if I was to simplify it, and that's what I'm going to do. And sometimes we lose a little bit when we oversimplify. But as a degree in agronomy taught me to identify the problem and buy something to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Identify a nutrient deficiency and buy something to fix it. Identify a disease, an insect problem, and buy something to fix it. If I sum up agronomy, that would be it. Is to identify the problem, determine if it's at an economic threshold to fix, and then fix it. Buy something to fix it, okay? Ecology, and I have little, or I didn't have any ecology in college. Had a little ecology in high school. I feel like now I've got a lot of ecology as to identify the problem and why do we have it? You know, what caused the problem? And what can I change in my management to get rid of the problem? Why do I have bugs? Why do I have insects? Why do I have a disease problem? And knowing that diseases attack plants that aren't healthy, why are my plants not healthy? Why do I have insects attacking these plants? Because they're not as healthy as they could be. So I think it's that's the difference, is realizing now that our, you know, these cropping systems, like I said, are propped up by inputs, and you know, we've got to realize that with everything we fix, we cause something else. We are not going to outsmart nature. We can fix one problem, and all we get is a more complicated problem on its heels. We spray for one bug, we get rid of that bug, but we also killed off a few other predatory insects that allowed for another insect now to show up that's twice as hard to kill and deal with as the first insect we worked with. Same way with diseases. We fix a disease, we just open up the opportunity for a worse disease than what we started with. So, I need to back in here. So this field has only been no-tilled, this is probably its 4th year. The rain that fell last night has soaked in. So we can feel it under our feet. We feel how soft it is. This is like walking on, you know, like Berber carpet, if you will, or shag carpet even, barefoot. It's soft, it feels good. It's not hard like walking on concrete. So that is what we need. We need those aggregates, because they let air in, water goes in, air comes out. This system is very young. I mean, the soil health system is young. So we look at aggregate formation, and then we also look at aggregate stability. How stable are those aggregates?
I'm Paul.
This is Paul also.
Oh, glad to meet you, Paul.
Hi there. I'm Paul.
What we've done here is we've actually taken a frame. We take a frame that cuts these trays out to the field, and we gather different fields under different management. It comes out of a natural setting, except for the tilled cropland. It's hard to get, so we just shovel it in. But then these pans are perforated on the bottom, so that any water that goes through the pan will go into the jar back here. The water that comes off the surface of the soil is going to go in this jar here. So we have a tilled cropland, we have hayfield, we have an overgrazed pasture or continuous grazed pasture. Here we have a managed pasture that's a little yellow, it's been in the trailer. And then we have a no-till crop field with a cover crop on it. So this was in corn last year. It was planted to cereal rye, rape, and crimson clover. So what's going on here, these different levels of management or vegetation that's on these soils causes aggregation. So does anybody want to describe aggregation? Does anybody know what aggregation is and want to tell me about it? The very smallest particles, clay and the small end of silts, are bound together by the smallest biology, the bacteria, the fungi, and the glues or the exudes from them. It's really a simple process that the biology in the soil binds the individual particles together, right? So we have sand, silt, and clay, and they're bound together to make an aggregate. The microscopic biology makes microscopic aggregates. And the bigger the biology, the bigger the aggregate, right? So there's a few of you shaking your head. You've been paying attention in class. So that's good. What does the biology eat? Organic material and root exudes, right? So we're basically gonna have more food here than here. If our food is produced by sunlight conversion through photosynthesis in the combining of water and carbon. So who did better in chemistry than I did? If anybody, all right. So simple sugars, C6, H12, O6. So that's pretty simple to figure out. That's just 6 carbons and 6 water molecules to make sugar, right? That's what plants do in photosynthesis, basically take energy and they do that and they leak it. So that's sugar. That's just sticky stuff. The biology eats that. Those biotic glues that come off the biology. So when you have a steady diet of table syrup, everything that oozes out of you is going to be sticky. So that's what they do. They stick things together. So there's no food here. The biology is suffering a little bit here. And over here we have a lot of food. So what we've got going on is and here is a good solar collector. We have a lot of leaves, a lot of photosynthesis going on. Plants are efficient by nature, and they release more sugars through the root exudes than what they need. So all we have to do is support them, give them an opportunity to collect sunlight. They leak sugar, feed the biology. The biology make aggregates, right? So when we rain on this, aggregates we'll put an inch of rain here. And I left that tilled cropland with 1 rainfall event on it. It's been rained on 1 time before. And what do you see on the backsplash? You see soil on that backsplash. And what you're seeing on that backsplash is the finest part of the soil. So tell me what cation exchange capacity is. There's 2 things that make CEC. Now, clay and humus. So humus, 20 years ago, they would have said we can't change CEC because they didn't recognize humus. Now we recognize humus as part of that cation exchange capacity. My point is, it's the finest particles. The finest particles are on the backboard right there. And how important is cation exchange capacity to productivity of our soils? Pretty important, right? So the first thing to leave is the most important thing. We don't lose the junk, we lose the best. So we're right about an inch here. So what we have is pretty easy to see. The first thing we saw was on the backsplash. We saw those finest particles. We saw a lot of our clays, the fine silts, the humus. We saw them being detached. We saw them go into suspension. And this is important information as we continue this conversation of these conservation practices. Well, they went into suspension and they ended up in the runoff jar. And you don't see any infiltration. So the hayfield actually is got better. So the hayfield got better. I harvested that last fall. And it greened up and it grew, and it actually has gotten better than it was. The overgrazed pasture infiltrated a little and ran off quite a bit, more than the hayfield did. That overgrazed pasture doesn't have a chance to build aggregates. Now look at our managed pasture. The managed pasture here is mostly fescue, which isn't the most soil health friendly grass that we could plant, but still it didn't have any runoff, and it had a bunch of infiltration. So what's the take-home message here of this? Keep it covered, but also keep that biology fed, right? Make sure that we have a situation that we're feeding that biology to keep those aggregates made. So does anybody know how long an aggregate lasts? So about 27 to 30 days. And then we have natural breakdown of that table syrup. So that stickiness will naturally break down and they go away. So it's important that we constantly build them. Okay, we have to constantly be recreating them, or we experience deaggregation. So one of the things that's fairly kind of a hot topic right now is intercropping or relay croppings. Anybody heard of those? Intercropping? Yay, nay, relay cropping. So what we're experimenting with is getting something planted before we harvest, because a good example of deaggregation would be with corn. Let's just use corn as an example. So right around the time that corn black layers, it's actually done supporting the biology because it's done. So its race is run. It has no more need to trade. I don't need to trade sunlight. I don't need to trade sugar for anything because I'm done. So Paul, how many days between black layer and harvest?
Usually a month.
A month. How long does an aggregate last? About 30 days. So we've got the process of deaggregation started right there before, and then we have to harvest, and then we have to plant a cover, and we have to get enough growth on our cover that cover crop is actually releasing some sugars to get those aggregates rebuilt. So you see we have this. So now a lot of folks are saying, hey, well, what if we interplant? What if we do something and have a plant growing in that corn or in there maybe dormant, and as soon as we harvest, we got instant takeoff, release of sunlight, and poof. Now that would be intercropping. Relay cropping is actually a little different in that relay cropping is where we're growing more than one cash crop at the same time. So I gave you a little example on the North Missouri Iowa line there. Got a producer who's growing cereal rye. He goes into the cereal rye and he plants buckwheat, and then he plants corn or soybeans. So we got cereal rye, buckwheat, soybeans. Then he harvests the cereal rye, and then he comes back and harvests the buckwheat and the soybeans at the same time, separates them, sells 3 crops off 1 acre, no fertilizer, no inputs. Reduced yields, but the three together is more profitable than one. Questions about this process right here? So the question is why does it say native pasture when it's not native pasture? And it's because I got in a little of emergency and I wrote on that backsplash with a permanent marker, native pasture. How many plants were in a native prairie? Over 100. By the time we count the native cool seasons, the native warm seasons, the legumes and the forbs, right? We have documented well over 100. And in that situation, we didn't ever have a non-green moment. We always had something green and growing in those native fields. So we do a lot of comparisons to those native fields from that aspect. When we look at the aggregation and we look at the biology that's present in those native ecosystems, we try hard to get back to that. We really can't. We can do fairly good, but we can't get back to that level of something green constantly, 365, something actually photosynthesizing, making aggregates and feeding that biology. Other questions?
How much soil is generally lost until cropland occurrence and rain?
Well, you know, that really depends. So we can have, you know, an inch of rain in 10 minutes, an inch of rain in 24 hours. The cropping system, a tillage system is by far more than this, obviously. So a lot of our systems, we had a discussion of that coming out here. A lot of our systems are probably in a year's time looking at 8-10 tons calculated soil loss per year. So one event could be bad, could be on the other end. But over a year's time, we're looking at somewhere, 6 to 10 tons of loss. So,
and that all depends on how, that when the earth is freshly tilled, it's going to take in that rain.
That's
but
right.
After it gets rained on a couple times with a couple of hard rains, it packs the top layer of that soil, and
Right.
then you get like 90% of water running off, and whatever's suspended takes it with it.
And that's what we have here. We have an inch rain that was on this tray before today. And so what's really neat about this is you can look at this, a fresh tilled tray won't have quite as much water in the jar, but it'll have quite a bit more sediment in it. And then it actually goes down a little bit and the total runoff goes up. So we have the most significant loss when we do have runoff the first time, and then we have more runoff with less soil after that because it seals over. And that's what we end up with. So
What else?
other questions you have, Paula?
Would you say that farmers are more responsive to tilling and putting the time into tilling, or putting the time into covering it and making sure that the biological factors are being kept to?
I think there's a lot of interest in doing less and investing less in time and tillage equipment. Equipment is expensive. Diesel fuel is not cheap. Horsepower is expensive. So there is a lot less tillage now than we had 10, 15 years ago because of that. I mean, that's an expensive thing to do. But it's also what we know. So it's hard to, do they understand this? A lot of them understand it. A lot of them see it, but a lot of them also are a little afraid to step out of their comfort zone, of what they've known for so long works. The old saying, don't fix what's not broke, but they realize there might be something broken, but it's not real comfortable to try to fix it like this sometimes. So they're receptive. I mean, we have a lot of producers that understand this process, but making those changes isn't easy. You know, it's not easy to do that.
You guys have to remember that changing over from system to system, we have to make money.
Absolutely.
You know, we're out here to make a living. We're out here to send our girls to college. So if you've got something that you're making money on, it's hard to switch over to something else. So what most farmers do, and like Drexel, you know, he advised me to do a long time ago, was, you know, take 20 acres, try it. You know, don't put the whole farm in it, and, you know, maybe have a bust. And through that first series of trials, I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. So when I transitioned over, you know, I could do this and still make money.
And I think I've actually even told Paul then, I've got the idea, you got to figure out how to make it work. Because aggregation here in southwest Missouri is no different than it is in Bismarck, North Dakota. So when I go to Bismarck, North Dakota, and there's producers all over, because somebody like me has been making it work for 30 years and teaching producers. And I come here, we don't grow the same crops. We don't have the same climate. We don't have the same rotations. We don't have the same markets. So what I have to do is find people that, like Paul, and tell them, this works. This is real. Now help me figure out how to make it work right here in Dade County. If we don't look at something and try it, we'll never figure it out, and then we're way behind. And so inputs are expensive, and even any of these producers, they want what they buy to work the best for them. If it's fertility or a pesticide, it's the best seed, whatever genetics they're buying, they want it to return money. So I mean, like Paul said, it's got to make money or we're not even here. We don't even have a place to stand on out here. So it has to be economically sustainable first. And then environmentally, you know, that's where we want to be environmentally sustainable. You know, the resource has to be there for us 20 years from now. And Paul made a comment very early here's when he said something about the soil, it was before you got here, he said, this is what's left of it. Well, you know, we've had some erosion, and the first step to soil health is to zero that out. I mean, there's a lot of the soil health gurus that say we can't make soil health improvements until we cut erosion out. We've got to have it out. But how much erosion did we have over here? You know, very little, none here, and very little. But there's always those outlying climatic things that happen. You know, we saw it in Nebraska. There's odd things happen, and it happens, okay? So how do we do something about it?
Drexel,
Yeah.
I don't want the kids to get the idea that Cherry and I are solely out here to make money.
Right.
We've got 3 girls, and probably not going to have a boy that's going to come on and take the farm on. But almost every farmer out there has kids, and they have boys, and they have boys that are looking to, you know, take on the family farm. And that farmer's thinking, you know, if I lose all the soil, you know, what's he going to have? What's my grandkids going to have? You know, what are my great grandkids still going to be farming, or are they going to be able, because there's, you know, I left them something to work with.
And
you know,
I think
that weighs hard on us.
And I think
not so much as the pioneers that opened up this place, because there was,
Right.
you know, lots of soil there, and, you know,
Well,
but we're getting to the point where we've got to do something.
And I think that's a very, very good point, that when we look at most all of our agricultural systems, the majority of them do stay in the family. And I've told people, I've used the same thing, and I told them, I said, what do you want to give the next generation? do you want to give them an asset or a liability? Because nobody's lowering the taxes on this stuff. Nope, nothing's going down. So is it a liability when you get it? Is it done? Is it to the point that it won't grow a profit? You know, does it run its course? Or is it still an asset that they are proud to get, that they want, that they can actually utilize and be profitable? Because maybe not out here just to make money, but it has to make money or nobody wants it. If it's degraded to the point that it's no good, nobody wants it. So I think that's a very good point, Paul. The best thing that we can do for water quality is never let this water get away from us. Now, you know, there's going to be times of runoff. There's going to be times that water gets away from us. But very seldom will it be that big of an issue on ground that we're looking at. This is no-till corn in a cover crop. Okay, so this he planted this a couple of days ago, and the infiltration is really good. So we've got good aggregation, just like the tray that was on this side of that rainfall simulator. So the best water quality practice we can do are those that keep that water here, that keep it infiltrating and not have to manage the horse after it's left the barn. Okay, and that's what's happening with a lot of our cropping systems. We're planning on water leaving, and water leaving with something in it. Well, if we can plan systems like this, conservation practices of no-till and covers, then we keep the water where it falls. So there's quite a bit of residue out here and quite a bit of carbon. There's not a lot of free nitrogen out here. There's some, because we got to get there. I pulled some Solvitas yesterday morning. And so the Solvitas measure the carbon dioxide. And so we know what's going on here. There's a lot of respiration. And that means there's a lot of activity going on. And that activity is using the nitrogen and releasing it constantly. And it's available to the corn that's going to come up, but it's not going that way. It's not being lost. The system is not leaky. And a lot of our agricultural systems are pretty leaky. And so if we can keep it bound and being released constantly, then it's just there all the time. It's just there. Does that make sense? It's just free. It's constantly being mineralized and immobilized all the time until it's used. And then it goes right back into the cycle again. So we have this constant wheel turning in this soil. And that's...
Remember we talked the other day about the bacteria grow and they eat the dead bacteria and then they die and then they become the food for the other bacteria. All that nitrogen, that carbon, everything.
That's
going
right.
Through that constant cycle.
So everything as it gets bigger. So here's the easiest way to remember mineralization and immobilization. Everything as it gets bigger eats something smaller. Everything operates on energy, okay? It doesn't matter what it is, energy makes it or breaks it. So carbon is energy, nitrogen is protein, and everything eats on its energy requirement. So when the protozoan, who is a 10-to-1, carbon, nitrogen, eats a 5-to-1 bacteria, to get the energy he needs, he's got to eat 2 bacteria. He's going to eat based on his energy requirement. And then what does he do with the extra nitrogen? He processes it and it goes out. That's nitrogen right there. That is the mineralization process. And then something's going to eat 2 or 3 of those protozoans and do the same process. So nitrogen mineralization is a natural process that's going on all the time. And so when we do tillage, what happens? And I hope we can get up there and see those Solvitas. I got a lot in there. We got to go look at them, or I'll bring them to class.
It's 10 till.
And I have till 7?
You need to be back in town by 7.
That's what I thought. So, that's right. So tillage, when we do tillage, what we do is we disrupt that natural wheel. So we provide for a lot of oxygen and we spike the system. So it ramps up. Everything goes to eating really fast and the metabolism goes crazy and everything goes fast. And what do? We have a spike in nitrogen. And then it goes, it just flattens out and it falls on its face. So we have even keel and a steady supply, or we have this flush. And when we have a flush and we have a rain, we have a flush, right? Down goes the nitrogen, even natural nitrogen. I didn't even have to put any on. And I can flush nitrogen out of the system naturally if I disrupt this system. Make sense?
Let's take a peek at those Solvitas.
Yep, let's go up there and look at them. So what we've got is a jar right here. And we take a sample. Here is this field right here, number 1. What happens is this blue paddle, it's yellow now. So it turns different colors, as you can see on this visual color key. It turns a grade of yellow or it doesn't, based on the amount of CO2 that's released. So it's just respiration. Everything breathing in there is taking in oxygen and giving off CO2. So the more the better. All I know is that on our scale, that it's 60 to 160 based on the yellow we have. So then I kind of just do the Drexel method. 60 to 160 is a pretty big gap there. So I know what time I took this, and I know how long it took to turn that yellow, because they only gonna go so yellow. I mean, there's just so yellow, right? So it turned this yellow in about 10 hours, because we were out here yesterday morning and it was really yellow yesterday evening. It didn't take it 24 hours to turn this yellow. So that tells me I think I'm on the upper end of 160, okay? So that's good, right? So here's one that's just equally as yellow, and it came out of a tilled field. So what does that tell me? I might tell you too that this one was the first one yesterday starting to turn yellow. So what does that tell me? I just explained it that way about 50 yards. That's the spike. So what I did, this one's on an even keel. It's got good biology. Now if I come back out here 30 days from now, and we're going to, and take another one of these, and I go to this field and take another one, what I'm expecting is for this one to do the exact same thing. It's going to turn about this yellow in about 10, 11 hours. This one that started turning pretty quickly, I might expect this one 30 days from now to be down on the 3.5 to 4. So what does that tell me? This one, 30 days from now, where's this corn going to be, Paul?
Nitrogen deficient.
Well, yeah, yes. I should have clarified. V4, V5? Yeah. Well, maybe a little farther along? Yep. So at V5, for you that are agronomists, V5, what does corn decide at V5? At V5 it decides, or so they say, there's arguable, but at V5 it decides girth, right? The ear girth. It's going to decide something there at V5, and if it's comfortable, if it's happy, then it's going to decide that I'm going to put on a little bigger girth. My ear size is going to be a little better. So what have I got to do to this one? If I want to get the same results, if I want this one to be just as happy, I got to go get it, don't I? Because this one's going to fall. This one actually might look really, really good when it's 3 inches tall and be really dark green. It's not really deciding a whole lot then. But 30 days from now when it falls, it's making the decision, I better prop it up. I better prop this one up with some nitrogen. So what I did was I flushed my nitrogen down, I lost it, and I got to go buy more and prop this system up. And this system is kind of on an even keel. Now, is there enough nitrogen in this system to do what we want it to do? Maybe, maybe not. But definitely reduced. Definitely reduce the amounts because I'm using what's there more efficiently, and I'm also going to do something else. Any additional nitrogen that I add to this system, I'm going to be a lot more efficient with. I don't have to double up because half of it's going to escape me. I can be a lot more efficient. So,
Drexel,
yes.
Economically, if you put on the soil everything that the plant needs, you can't make a go of it. It's just not economical. Your ground has to do something.
So, agronomically, I was asked the difference between, I got a degree in agronomy. They don't even offer one now, right? Is that right?
Sad but true.
That may not be sad. That may not be so
You don't
bad.
think?
I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe things have changed a little bit with good instructors like you, Dr. Lancaster. As an agronomy student, we really focused on, to sum it up, identify the problem and buy something to fix it. If it's nutrient deficient, buy it and fix it. If it's got a bug on it, figure out what bug it is and buy something to fix it. I hope that we're starting to learn some things about, hey, what have we done to cause this? How can I prevent this, not just keep buying things to fix problems that arise, because we're never going to get ahead of that. We're just going to buy ourselves to death. Our soil has to do some. And we know, we've got enough research now that know that corn, we can make a bushel of corn with a half of unit of nitrogen. Agronomically, they taught us 1. And you know why they taught us 1? Because half of it, half the 1, I'm going to lose. Our systems are leaky, and we know they're leaky, so we plan on the leak. We got a hole in the bucket. We only need a gallon of water, but we know we got to put 5 gallons in it to get where we're going with the gallon, because it's going to leak the whole way there. So when we plug up the bucket, we don't have to carry 5 gallons to start out with.
This is a real exciting time in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
All the years of plowing and working the ground, and then a big innovation, no-till. We started saving the soil, and now cover crops is the next big innovation that's going to take the no-till to a higher level, to a better level.
Yeah.
So I'm real excited. Here I've been doing it 40 years.
Right. I think it is exciting time in agriculture, because a lot of the things that we might have seen in observation, now we might know more of the answers to, of why we saw what we did. We're learning a lot of answers to old observations. So, yes.
Just to buy a no-till drill.
You can buy a no-till drill all the way from 10 foot up to 45 foot. And 10-footers are around $15,000, $20,000, and the 40 or 50 footers are like $130,000 or $40,000. But of course, the bigger ones, you have to have a bigger, nicer tractor to pull them. So you're talking about $200,000 for a tractor to pull the bigger ones. So it's all a matter of economics on what you can afford and what you have to get your ground covered.
And I think too, I want to just add to that, that you don't just flip a switch and make changes like this, because if you don't have a no-till drill to go out and just decide you're gonna, that's a big investment. So when you start switching the system from a conventional system, conventional drill, conventional planters, whatever, and you start making those switches, it's an investment that has to work.
So just starting out crop farming, would you say that going no-till would be easier than coming from conventional till to no-till?
Yeah, no-till and covers right off the bat.
See, when you're switching over, you've got all of that tillage equipment sitting there. And you say, well, fine, we'll buy you a no-till and just sell that stuff. Well, you don't want to sell that stuff until you figure out how to get this working. So there you are with 2 sets of equipment. You know, that's a lot of expense, you know.
Do they rent no-till drills out here?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is when, in what the 80s, the 1980s was probably where we were with no-till, where we are with cover crops right now.
Okay, I was going to ask you that. How is the adoption of cover crop, from your perspective, kind of mirrored or not the adoption of no-till?
Well, it's just like no-till. I mean, when no-till started, it's kind of neat. It was right before my career. I mean, it was just right prior to my career. But we loaded up people on buses and we took them to no-till farms. Everybody went to Jim Kinsella's over there in Illinois and looked at no-till. I mean, he was like the no-till guru. Well, now we've done the same thing with cover crops and soil health, and we load people up and we take them to these farms that have figured things out and made them work. So those early adopters, no-till, they grabbed it and they ran with it and they figured out the issues, and then the watchers have came along. And I was telling earlier that some form of no-till is probably being used on, I ventured 90%.
The stats that I saw that are a couple years old most recently, it's about 70. So for inocular estimates, you're probably pretty close.
Yeah, and so no-till beans are widely acceptable. I mean, that was something that really took off. No-till corn, 20 years ago, you wouldn't find no-till corn in this county, I don't think. I mean, I don't remember any, and now we have it. So the adoption, I think, is really pretty close to a mirror.
But you guys, you weren't alive in the 80s, but in the 1980s, it was really rough on the farm.
Yes.
With an interest rate of 18%, can you imagine buying a car at 18% interest? You pay double for it every, 4 years. So one of the things that kind of pushed everybody over the line into no-till was they had to have more acres, to make it work. And, just couldn't physically get over the ground to work it. When you work the ground, you work it 3 times before you plant. Okay, no-till, there's just 1 pass, and then spray it. And then the other thing in the 80s is they came up with a whole lot better selection of chemicals that didn't stay in the ground so long. They deteriorate really quickly. And lots of the chemicals now that they have, in 2 weeks' time, they're gone. So there's a lot less worry about contamination with chemicals in water supply and that sort of thing. And of course, Roundup. Roundup's kind of a, bad thing now, but it was a godsend for us because we had one cheap chemical that would get everything.
So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that, and I almost forgot it. I'm glad Paul mentioned it. What's the end all? What's the end all to most of our pesticides?
Resistance? Is that what you're looking for?
Nope.
I
I am fishing for how do we get rid of them? How do we get rid of it? What process gets rid of that herbicide?
When you don't have a need for it.
Well,
after it's in the environment.
There you go.
We've been talking about this in class, guys. What gets rid of all of those things we put in the environment?
Microbes. And bacteria is the biggest one. Okay? So what do we... Atrazine is an excellent one to look at. Bacteria eat it. Okay, so if we want to get rid of it, if we want to use it and we want to get rid of it, break it down, we need these guys. We need to support a healthy home with a healthy food supply so that these herbicides are cleaned up by the bacteria. You know, those microbes, the soil's full of them. It's living, breathing, just like we are. We're full of them. We're full of microbes. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And but another thing,
it's a thing. You know, if we can keep the water home,
yeah.
You know, all of the chemicals and sprays that are in the water, we keep that home, and then the microbes eat it. You know, it doesn't go anywhere.
That's right.
Drexel, another thing I think why some farmers are not leery about going to it, they just haven't gone to, because you have to look at, you've got the great-grandfather still alive, grandfather alive, the father, the 2 sons, the 3 sons. They've already invested in all this equipment, and it just really tear Grandpa's heart out if we tried to make a change, and it, you know.
Family traditions run pretty strong.
So how much more profit do you see doing this versus his?
Well, what I can tell you is just right down the road here, last year I had 80 acres of corn, and right next to the farm, this field right here in Till, okay, it just so happened that we both planted our fields the same day, and just so happened we used the same variety of corn, so that was the same. And our spray program was almost identical, and I know our fertilization program with the chicken litter and a little bit of nitrate was exactly the same. Okay, we even harvested these corns the same day. We're in the same, you know, the field the same day. My corn did 127 bushel, and theirs did 104. The only difference was I used cover crops and they tilled. So I thought that was an excellent test.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that 20 bushels on the top, that comes out of your pocket. You know, you have to have so much to pay for all your expenses and everything. And then what you can gain on top of that is what you
It's
can
the cream.
use the cream on the crop.
Yeah.
So
we've got to wrap it up. We got to send you guys back to Springfield. I'm glad you came. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something.
Thank you, Drexel.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming.
The students really respond well to Drexel because he's so enthusiastic about what he does and sees so many different things. I actually had the students write some reflections on the field trip, and so I just read through those a few days ago. And one of the things that was said that really stuck out to me, that the students observed about Drexel in particular, is how he partners with the farmers to learn about how to manage a particular piece of land. Our students hear a lot about the importance of soil conservation. Some students came away with a greater appreciation for the role of cover crops in soil conservation and soil health. And we've talked about the soil microbiology a lot more. Do you remember the little Salvita jars that Drexel had? So that was a really good demonstration for them so that they could visualize that there are things that are alive in that soil that make that, and that's what makes that soil useful.
Has the soil gotten better or worse since you've been doing this?
Well, you know, better, and not because of me. I'm not going to take credit for that, but you know, I'll take credit for getting a group of producers together and encouraging them to make some changes in Dade County, and then expanding that group to a larger group in Southwest Missouri, and just bringing information to them. And they get the credit for that, not, you know, they get the credit for making the soil better. They're the ones that are doing it.
So why aren't people adapting? Why aren't farmers adapting?
I think it's a lot about that comfort zone. It's not all unicorns and rainbows getting from point A to point B. I mean, when you're teetering, it's not our instinct to do something out of our comfort zone. So people just keep doing what they've always done. It's hard for them to see the value of soil. So immediately, it may not be something you feel much. because you're going to feel the bill for the seed and the diesel within 30 days of getting it. So it's hard to stand at a producer's headquarters who has been very successful. They've got a barn full of nice equipment, driving a nice vehicle in a nice home, and tell them you're all wrong. Mm-hmm. It's hard to argue with success, and that makes it even harder for us to get people to understand. They have profited from ancient sunlight. So harvesting that organic matter a 10th or a 20th of a percent at a time over the last 50 to 75 years, making these good yields and good crops, along with good genetics that have proliferated that, has led to very successful producers who have done so at the expense of that ancient sunlight. We can find producers all over the country that have gone to a low input system. How well adopted is it? Not very. We've made a lot of difference, and we have a lot less environmental impact going on now than we did then. We're not done. I wouldn't want to do anything else.